Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're going to be doing a build request. I was asked to build a Shadow Monk rogue combo, which I'm surprised because I haven't actually done that yet. The closest I've come is a Shadow Monk Gloomstalker Ranger, which I did for my Nightcrawler build, so the fact that I haven't built this yet is quite interesting. But I don't think I'm going to be making this build in the way that the person who requested it probably would have expected, because I think the pretty standard rogue monk kind of multi-class option here would be to take Thief Rogue, because getting that extra bonus action is going to allow you to basically flurry of blows twice per turn, which is very, very powerful. And I think most people would mix Open Hand Monk with you know, Thief Rogue and just go absolutely crazy with unarmed strikes. However, I'm not doing that. I wanted to come up with something a little bit more fun, thematic, flavorful, and would be interesting to use across a whole campaign, and I think I've come up with something really, really cool. So let's get into the build. Actually, my apologies, one small note before we get into the build. Basically, I would appreciate that for this video, especially if you're a regular of the channel, I would recommend that you either watch all the way to the end when I kind of do my usual end of video kind of blabbering, or at the very least skip to the end, because I'm going to be going over a few important things. Number one will be regarding my last video, the Fist of Talos, and some notes I have on that video, and two, something in regards to the future of the channel and how I'm going to be making videos going forward. It's not a serious issue, and I'm not going to be slowing down production or anything like that for the most part, but I do want to get a little bit more community involvement in the channel going forward, so I wanted to kind of pitch something to you guys and kind of see how we go with it. So I really hope at the very least you go straight to the end or stick around for it, but either way, let's get into the build. So, obviously we're going to be starting Rogue. We're playing this kind of like, sort of, the way I see this character is a bit more of a cat burglar type character, who uses their smarts, wit, and cunning to basically get what they want. Definitely a morally grey character, so you can kind of ride the line between good and evil here, but obviously play the character however you like, but that's just kind of how I see it in my head. So we're obviously going to be starting Rogue. This is going to get a sneak attack, which unfortunately when you multi-class out of Rogue, you're not really going to be pushing this to the highest level, but getting a little bit of extra damage when you can anyway is always nice, and since Baldur's Gate 3 applies sneak attack when you could have used it even if you don't actively select it, it's pretty good. Next up are our ability scores. Now, you are going to want to kind of go with a pretty standard stat spread for a rogue at the start. I would definitely recommend grabbing a 16 in dexterity, probably a 14 in constitution, and then since we're going to be taking monk levels later, you probably want to grab a 16 in wisdom and kind of have your intelligence and charisma be around the 10 mark, so you're not taking negative penalties on those. And I think this is a pretty decent stat spread for the whole build if you wanted to go with this, but because of some equipment we're going to be using later, we're going to get a little bit weird with the stat spread. So I'm going to say you're going to want a 10 in dex, a 16 in constitution, an 8 in intelligence, definitely a 16 in wisdom as we already have, and definitely want to grab probably 14 in charisma and a 10 in strength. This is just going to make you kind of good at everything overall, and our equipment in the future is that I'm going to show off in a minute is going to be buffing up our dexterity and our intelligence for us, so we're not going to need to worry about those stats once we get those pieces of equipment. Take a standard rogue stat spread with a splash of wisdom for net at the start, and then once you get these pieces of equipment around kind of Act 1 and Act 2, respec into this kind of stat spread to get the most out of this character. As for your proficiencies, I would definitely recommend grabbing Sleight of Hand and Stealth. I get these from my background, and popping expertise on those. And then I would recommend grabbing the all of the kind of pillars of compensation. Maybe you can trade out performance if you don't want to go with that. In fact, I might pop that into perception instead and kind of go from there, or investigation. Personally, you can do whatever you like with this. Next up at Rogue level 2, nothing too crazy here, but we are going to be getting our bonus action Hide, Dash, and Disengage. Very, very powerful abilities in this game and worth grabbing. Next up at Rogue level 3, we get to pick our subclass, and obviously we are 100% going with the Arcane Trickster. So why have I gone this route? Well, the way I kind of envisioned this character mechanically and thematically is as a kind of cat burglar type character who uses various gadgets and gizmos, well, not literal gadgets, but you get the point, to kind of enhance their, thievery capabilities. So maybe someone like Catwoman could be an interesting inspiration from, from Batman. Basically, what I want this character to kind of be is like a kind of thief-type rogue, but more of like a grand phantom thief type, who has all sorts of interesting tricks up their sleeve to get the job done. And as such, Arcane Trickster works really, really well here. But what makes Arcane Trickster so interesting? Well, we get the Mage Hand... Mage Hand... Legerdemain. I'm sure that's how that's pronounced. Mage Hand Legerdemain. When you cast Mage Hand, the Spectral Hand is invisible and can carry out additional tasks. So in this game, this means you can pickpocket and lockpick from a distance using your Mage Hand. And when you pickpocket, your Mage Hand will be carrying the item and can bring it back to you. But also, since it's completely invisible, you can send your Mage Hand to scout ahead and check out locations without it being spotted unless an enemy has C invisibility, which does not come up often. So you get to scout out entire locations before going in and decide the best way to get your surprise attacks, your sneak attacks, all that good stuff, or maybe even slip past unnoticed entirely. A really, really cool feature that absolutely deserves to be experimented with in this game, and I think would be a fun thing to do in a playthrough as you go. We're also going to get a couple of cantrips here. Friends is absolutely an amazing cantrip. It's one of the best in the game, and it's going to buff up your charisma checks immensely, which is going to be great for dialogue. You can also take Minor Illusion here. Now, we are going to be taking Shadow Monk later, because that is part of the build request. However, this is still a useful cantrip to get now, since we're going to be getting Monk way later, or at least a bit later, depending on how you want to build this. So having Minor Illusion to be able to distract enemies so you can slip past them is always a good shot, but you can obviously respec out of this later and pick up a different cantrip if you're desperate for that extra slot. As for your spells, this is a pick your favourite situation here. We're going to get a bunch from the Arcane Trickster spell list, which is basically all about manipulating your enemies. I quite like Disguise Self, as it gives you a bunch of opportunity to mess with dialogue, and having kind of a disguise kit on hand is always fun for someone who is a bit of a roguish thief. Thief? Yes, thief. And you can pick whatever you like here. You can go for Sleep if you want to have maybe like a sleep gas type deal. Prone if you want like laughing gas, kind of like the Joker or something, but I don't know. Color Spray if you want Pocket Sand, but again, not really necessary. And Charm Person. Now, I've said Charm Person is kind of useless when you have friends, but it's not really, because friends can't turn a hostile creature non-hostile, whereas Charm Person can. However, I can't think of many instances where Charm Person is going to, making an enemy non-hostile is really going to matter in this game, because a lot of this game's encounters are just going to become hostile again anyway after it ends, and you're not really going to get that much out of it comparatively, but it definitely has its uses, so pick it if you want it. I'm going to go for Pocket Sand, because after saying that, I really want to grab it. We're also gonna get one level 1 spell from the Wizard spell list, and it can be any spell. Obviously, there's a ton of useful utility spells here, but since we only get one spell, I can't help but recommend taking Shield. This is one of the single greatest single utility spells in the game. I mean, obviously, other utility spells are good, but they're usually at their best when they're mixed with other spells, whereas Shield is just good on its own. And the ability to use your reaction in the spell slot to increase your armor class by 5 is nothing to sneeze at, and will save your life in a lot of occasions. Definitely worth picking up. And next up at Rogue Level 4, you're going to be getting your first feat, and it honestly does not matter which one you take, because where your stats are kind of sitting at, because of the equipment we're going to be using, you have a lot of freedom in what to use here. Ability score improvements aren't as necessary, so you can kind of go with whatever you like. You can go for Sharpshooter if you want to play a crossbow variant on this build. The Lucky feat if you want to be able to get, advantage on attack possibility checks or saving throws for the cost of a luck point. That could be really fun, especially for a character like this. You could go for something like dual wielder, perhaps, if you want to maybe do some dual wielding, which this build will do, but not to the point where it needs this feat, but you could definitely pick it up. There's a ton of different things you could grab. You could grab Actor, you could grab Performer, just grab anything that seems fun to you. I'll just go through the ability score improvement to keep it simple. And bumping either Constitution or Wisdom at this point is fine. Wisdom is going to affect our Monk stuff later, but probably going Constitution first just to get that bit of extra HP isn't exactly a bad option either. But I'm going to take Wisdom for now, because obviously we're going to be going into Monk later, and I'm going to want those higher Monk stats. You also do get another spell at this level. Pick whatever you like. I'm going to grab Sleep for the Sleep Powder or Sleep Gas angle. Now that we've hit our Rogue level 4 and gotten our feet, we're going to be leaving Rogue and we're not coming back, as we are going to be wanting to be taking a decent amount of Monk levels. However, there is a quick pit stop I want to make before we get there. And it's going to be Wizard. Now, Wizard is going to give us some interesting things. Obviously, we get more cantrips, including Shocking Grasp, which can be our electric hand, which is going to do 2d8 lightning damage at this point. You can grab Blade Ward for some extra defense, and then your final spell can be whatever you like. If you want more ranged options, look here. I'm personally going to pick Ray of Frost, because being able to reduce the target's movement speed and then use our rogue movement to be able to get away from them and play keep away is going to be quite powerful. But you can take anything you like here that suits you. We're going to get to prepare 6 spells, and of course that means we're going to be able to take our utility spells. Enhanced Leap, Longstrider, and Featherfall all work perfectly for this type of build. It fits in really nicely. Being able to use like some sort of like gadgets or minor magic to be able to bump up some parts of your roguish kind of kit is really interesting. Being able to jump higher, run faster, and be immune to fall damage all fits in perfectly with a high-flying Phantom Thief type character. In addition, Find Familiar is super fun. We can use this to summon a pet familiar, so we could be a cat burglar with a literal cat. Did I say cat burger? Oh no. Anyways, so basically, and then that cat can be used to distract things. It's a bit similar to Minor Illusion, except it can obviously just having a pet in this game is just fun. It's cute. It's nice. Grease for an oil slick trap is really fun as well, and then I will take Fog Cloud as a bit of a smoke grenade. This will become a little bit less relevant later on, since we're taking Shadow Monk levels, we'll be getting Darkness, so you could take something like Magic Missile instead of if you want, but I quite like grabbing Fog Cloud here, because again, I don't really want to take like ranged magic spells, because I feel like that goes against the theme of the build, but taking all these utility spells is quite fun. We only get to prepare 1 spell in this screen because of our, our cold situation, but by the time this build is finished, you will be able to prepare up to 5, so you can take any 5 of these. So, yeah. Don't worry about this screen here. It's not lying to you, but it's kind of false. Also, I can't help but notice my character has disappeared. They really are a great thief. They've managed to disappear right in front of me. Now, obviously we're going for a 2nd level of Wizard here, and this is where our subclass is going to be important. We're taking Transmutation. Hey, they're back. Now why Transmutation here? It's not exactly a popular subclass, but we get this, Experimental Alchemy. You can brew 2 alchemic solutions instead of 1 when combining extracts, if you succeed a DC 15 medicine check. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get proficiency in medicine, so perhaps we should have taken that earlier in the build. That's my mistake, but hey ho, I kind of forgot about this. So, finagle things around any way you like to be able to get that. But however, this is really important, because what I thought of for this build, right, is in addition to the utility we get from our level 1 spells and cantrips, what if we actually use the alchemy system as well to its fullest potential? Because let's be honest, how many of you have actually used alchemy? Like, be honest, how many of you have used it? I'm going to say not that many, because as from everyone I spoke to, who I talked about this with, just said, nah. Never really touched it, and I personally never touched it, but it's a really interesting system, because if you actually go into Baldur's Gate 3 with the mindset of, oh, I want to be picking up all these alchemy ingredients as I go, it actually makes the game really interesting, and being able to concoct potions that boost your abilities, being able to make grenades and various other vials of stuff and traps and all that, and like elixirs and stuff that give you buffs that last until your next long rest. Playing around with alchemy and getting this buff to it here is super fun. I wanted to take 2 levels of Wizard anyway to get all these utility spells regardless to mix with Arcane Trickster, but getting this along the way is just such a fun idea, being able to like be this like Phantom Thief who's really smart and is able to craft things and make their own tools to help them get through situations. This actually is really fun, and I highly recommend giving it a go. It's a super cool little addition to this build, and obviously, yes, it kind of does mean the power of the build is dependent on what the items you can find. However, you're never really going to be hard up for alchemy materials in this game, as they're so abundant, and it is just a fun little extra system you get to play with as you go through this game that is on theme and unique. But if you're really dead set against it, there's nothing wrong with taking something like Illusion to get improved Minor Illusion, Divination if you want Portent, but apparently people don't. Enchantment if you want to be able to charm or incapacitate creatures. Abjuration if you want the Arcane Ward. You can go for a few different options here, but I really recommend you go a little bit different and try Transmutation. We're also going to get 2 more spells at this level, and again, we've kind of run out of utility options here, so it's more of a pick your favorite situation now. I would definitely say Magic Missile is definitely a solid option, but also I'm going to recommend Thunder Wave. If you don't want to use your disengage action to be able to move away from enemies, and you want to do a little bit of damage on the way, you can take a gamble on Thunder Wave, doing a bit of thunder damage, and also being able to push enemies away from you. And this also helps, you know, if there's a bunch of enemies around you, which means you can do a bunch of damage. Right, and now we're going to be leaving Wizard because we got all that we're here for. Yes, you can get level 2 spells at this level, and obviously things like Invisibility, Misty Step, and all that could be really useful. So if you're not interested in Shadow Monk, don't feel like you have to go with it, play around with this, but we're going to go with the build request here, and I think Shadow Monk does kind of work in the theme of this build, so we're going to start heading over there now. So we're multi-classing into Monk. This is going to give you your usual Monk kit, Flurry of Blows, which is now going to weaponize our bonus action a bit better, which is nice. But you also obviously get unarmored defense, so if you wanted to wear clothing on this build, you can. I'm personally not, and we'll get into that in a minute. And obviously you get all the usual unarmed strike stuff, so yeah, pretty good stuff for a level 1 of a multi-class. At Monk level 2, again, we're not getting anything terribly interesting. Our movement speed is, well, again, we're going to be wearing armor on this build, but if you wanted to go the unarmored movement route, you can. And we also are going to be getting dash and disengage as bonus action, but we already have that. But we do get patient defense, allowing us to impose disadvantage on attack rolls against us. But yeah, let's keep going. At Monk level 3, we're going to be picking our subclass, and we are going to be going full Way of Shadow, as per the request. I've said it a bunch of times, and this is going to get us a bunch of cool stuff. We already have a bonus action hide, so that's kind of meh, but we are going to be getting Pass Without Trace, allowing us and our whole party to gain a +10 bonus to stealth checks until a long rest, or until we break concentration for the cost of 2 key points. This is an extremely useful ability, and is going to be great for getting you and your whole party through stealth encounters and setting up those surprise rounds. We're also going to be getting Darkness. This is going to be our Black Smoke Bomb. This is going to be very, very helpful and, you know, basically allow you to get more surprise attacks on enemies or take enemies out of a fight. Dark Vision exists, and Silence is going to allow you to shut down spellcasters in a major way, and also can help you even stealth yourself. So you could even cast Silence in an area you want to sneak through, and then be able to sneak through without making any noise, so that can also work. But obviously the main reason we're using it is to take down spellcasters. And this is where you would get Minor Illusion if you didn't already have it. It says, obviously, I already know this spell, so this would be the point where you'd be like, hey, I can get rid of that now, and let's swap that to something else. Next up, we're going to be a Monk level 4, which means we are going to be getting another feat. And again, you still have a lot of freedom to play around with here. It's not going to be the end of the world. Pick whatever you like. I am personally going to go with just another ability score improvement, and I might bump up my Constitution to 18 here, as I feel like an 18 in Wisdom is perfectly fine, since we're not getting things like Monk abilities like what Open Hand gets or what Way of the Four Elements gets. Our enemies are going to be making a ton of saving throws against our Monk abilities, so bumping up Constitution here is absolutely fine, or even Charisma if you want to be better in dialogue, but we don't have really any charisma-based abilities with this build. Next up at Monk level 5, we're going to be getting extra attack. Now, this isn't really meant to be a frontline fighter, so getting extra attack this late isn't exactly a bad deal, but getting it either way is still pretty nice, which means you're going to be able to make 2 attacks per turn. You're also going to get Stunning Strike, but because we're a Shadow Monk, we're also going to be getting Cloak in Shadows. If you're obscured, you can become invisible. Pretty fun. Cloaking device, you know the drill. Obviously not as powerful as just regular invisibility or greater invisibility, because you have to be obscured to use it, but still nice to have it essentially for free as an action that doesn't cost key points. And finally, at Monk level 6, we're going to be getting, at this level, we're going to be getting improved unarmed strikes. We're going to be getting key empowered strikes, so now our unarmed attacks overcome resistance and immunity to non-magical damage. And Shadow Step allows us to teleport as a bonus action between heavily and lightly obscured areas. And we also gain advantage on our next melee attack roll after doing so, which stacks amazingly with Rogue. Again, we get this at total level 12, so maybe you would want to play maybe like a Monk first and a Rogue second, but that's entirely up to you. Maybe you want to dump the Wizard levels altogether to get here early. Play around with it, see what you like. I'm just trying to present something that I think is cool. And that is the build. Now, overall, I would say this is a fairly fun and interesting build. You're going to get a lot of interesting utility with your spells inside and outside of combat. You're going to get a lot of, interesting utility with your key and, unarmed actions. You can use sneak attack a lot more often thanks to our Shadow Monk features. There's a lot to do here. I will, however, suggest, though, if you really want to play into that, I have a ton of abilities that, let me bump up my stealth aspects, I actually think this build would be quite fun to kind of maybe step out of Shadow Monk a little bit and throw around, some levels in Trickery Cleric, some levels in Bard. Basically play around with, how many different ways you can get different little bits of kit early on in levels to really give yourself this high-flying, do-it-all kind of person. But I'll let you guys play around with that. Let's get into the equipment. So let's get into the two pieces of equipment that this build is kind of based around, at least stat-wise. We're getting the Warped Headband of Intelligence to put our intelligence to 17, giving us a +3, which means, as with our wizard, we can now slot in 5 spells, as I said, giving us all of our utility spells that we want. This is how we kind of get around the multi-ability score dependent kind of nature of this build, and I think it definitely works out well in our favour overall. So definitely want to pick this up. You can get this really early into Act 1 if you know what you're doing, and is a super powerful item throughout a whole campaign. Speaking of, similar thing, Gloves of Dexterity. Sets your dexterity to 18, and you also get attack and damage +1. This is super powerful. You get it very early on in Act 2, or pretty much as soon as you start the game if you don't feel like playing the Act 1 main quest. This is really, really powerful and can be easily obtained. So combining these two together means that you can pretty much do whatever you want with the rest of your stats. So our final stats are 10 strength, 18 dex, 18 con, 17 int, 18 whiz, and 14 charisma. Perfect. Now, let's get into the rest of the kit. You have an option for your cloak here. You can get either the Shadeslayer cloak, which means while hiding, the number you need to roll a critical hit while attacking is reduced by 1. This effect can't stack. Or you can grab the Cloak of Cunning Broom, which allows you to, when the wearer disengages, they also create a foggy cloud within a 2-meter radius that lasts for 1 turn. This is actually super powerful, because if you disengage as a bonus action with a rogue, all your enemies are blinded, meaning that you can then sneak attack them straight up for free. Quite a powerful combo, actually, that I didn't realize was in the game. So yeah, this is probably the better option, as it's easier to get than the Shadeslayer cloak as well. If you're not interested in the wizard levels and don't care about your intelligence, you can swap the Warped Headband of Intellect out for the Covert Cowl, which we can actually have a look at how that looks in this build, and I think this looks pretty badass, but you look a bit more assassin-y than roguish, in my opinion. But let's have a look at it. While obscured, the number you need to roll a critical hit is reduced by 1. This effect can stack, and you get a +1 to dexterity saving throws. Basically, you could stack this with the Shadeslayer cloak, and because of the advantage you would get from the Shadow Monk feature, you can do a lot of sneak attacks and get a lot of critical hits off that way. So, basically having an 18 to crit is really good. But I digress. Next up, the armor. Once you get to Act 3, you're going to want to pick up either the Ballist armor or the Elegant Studded Leather. The Ballist armor is going to be perfect for this build because we are using piercing weapons, and this makes enemies within 2 meters become vulnerable to piercing damage, meaning they take double damage from our attacks, which is super powerful. Also, getting a +2 bonus to initiative rolls is great for someone who wants to be moving early and getting the drop on people. But obviously, the Elegant Studded Leather is also an option, and looks the exact same if you color it right, which means you still get that +2 bonus to initiative rolls, but you also gain advantage on stealth checks, which is great for a rogue, and you're also going to be grabbing shield once per long rest in addition to the shield castings we already have, so you can save those spell slots. Either of these are great. If you're playing more of a good character, go with the Elegant Studded Leather. If you're going with oh, good god, my apologies. If you're playing more of a evil character or a morally grey character that would rather, murder a single person to save a whole city than not, you can play with the Ballist armor and get benefits from that, which is probably what I would personally recommend, as I feel like this being able to inflict vulnerable to our main damage type is extremely strong. Next up is the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. Again, I wish there was a more interesting option here, but really this is the best option for this build that is on theme. You get a casting of Misty Step once per short rest, which is really, really powerful and fits on theme with someone who is a high-flying rogue that can move around quite quickly, and also not being able to be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared and cannot slip in grease or ice basically means that we're not going to fall prey to our own traps if we're casting something like grease or, something that would cause enemies to slip over or something like that. So it's really important to grab these. Again, they come up in Act 1 and they're really good. However, if you want to determined to wear something other than these, there are a few other options later on in the game, but you'll have to do your research. Next up, the Silver Pendant. This is an interesting one. You grab this one in Act 2, and it literally just, all it does is it gives you guidance for free. But that's awesome. So if you don't have a cleric like Shadowheart in your party for whatever reason, this, basically this necklace gives you the ability to cast guidance on yourself for free. Now, obviously you can't cast guidance and friends at the same time because, you know, they both are different and require concentration. However, this is still a useful extra utility to have, and since this build doesn't really rely on a specific amulet, I figured I would just showcase this here in case you guys didn't know it was in the game, because I think it's actually a really interesting option if you don't want to rely on having a cleric in your party for that buff, because it is a nice buff. Next up, the Shifting Corpus Ring, the ability to cast invisibility or blur once per, and blur, I should say, once per long rest is really, really good. You grab this in Act 2, and it's going to allow you to do basically get these extra bits of utility that are on theme and will come in very useful in certain situations, so definitely want to pick these up. And finally, the Ring of Twilight, not a necessary ring, but I wanted to show it off. You gain a +1 bonus to your armor class while you're obscured, so if you're playing with the whole Shadow Monk darkness thing, you can gain a bit of armor class with that. So yeah, pretty good. Obviously, both the Elegant Studded Leather and the Ballist Armor are obtained in Act 3, so if you wanted something that works in the meantime, you can grab the Studded Leather Armor +1. It's still a good-looking armor set that will do a decent job until you get to Act 3, or at least maybe kind of mid-end Act 2. It looks good, and it can be obtained in Act 1 by following a certain questline, so definitely worth picking up, but obviously you want to grab one of these two once you level up. Well, not level up, get to Act 3. What am I talking about? But let's get into the weapons. I've not gone for any specific ranged weapons here, but obviously you can go with your dual crossbows, you can go with your Darkfire shortbow, pick whatever you like. But let's get into the weapons here. The Knife of the Undermountain King. Again, I've used this one quite a few times, but it really is the best option if you're playing a piercing damage build, or a short sword build, which is what I wanted to go for here as a finesse weapon. Easily one of the best weapons you can grab in this game for sure. You can get it in Act 2 from the same vendor you grab the Gloves of Dexterity from, whether you steal it or buy it. And the wielder scores a critical hit when rolling a 19, and if they roll 2 or less damage on the die, you can re-roll that result, taking the highest, which is insane. You're just stacking this with Rogue and all the advantage we get, and the other stuff that can boost our crits. We are just going to be getting critical hit after critical hit after critical hit and be super strong. This also comes with Shadow Blade. You have advantage on attack rolls against slightly or heavily skilled targets, so if you're playing into the Shadow Monk aspect again, you also get advantage all the time. This is a better Shadow Blade than the actual Shadow Blade. I'm sorry, bringing up that old chestnut again. There's also a +2 weapon, which is good. But because it is a light finesse weapon, we can also dual wield it without any additional requirements needing to be met. And I did want to have a weapon in the offhand here, and I've gone for the Susa Dagger. Now, this is not here to do damage. This is here to silence enemies on hit. For a bonus action, or a regular action if you wanted to try throwing it, which you can do because this has the thrown property and it will work pretty well, you can basically silence your targets, which I thought made sense for a kind of a roguish, stealthy person, but this is also going to be really useful for shutting down mages. So just having this in the offhand, and if it ever comes up that this is a useful thing to do, you can just quickly bop a mage on the head with this, and they can no longer cast spells for a little while. Really useful. Obviously, if you don't care so much about having these higher ability scores, maybe you don't care as much about your wisdom or your constitution, grab the dual wielder feat and get a +1 bonus to your armor class out of this, or even yet, you can mix and match more dual wielding weapons and see where you go with it. But it's not really necessary for us to have an extra bonus action attack, because obviously we're playing a monk, so we get Flurry of Blows, which is more than likely going to be a better option anyway. But yeah, that is the build. Overall, I think this is actually a really fun and interesting character to play. Whether you maybe do this on maybe Astarion or have it as your main build, I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this. The ability to craft all these alchemic ingredients to get more out of them is really fun, and using all these utility spells to just feel like you're zooming all over the place and doing interesting things both inside and outside of combat really makes this build an interesting take, and it lets me fulfill my dream of finally making an Arcane Trickster that I actually felt was useful. Oh, I will actually show off speaking of Arcane Trickster, let's show off the Mage Hand Ledgermane. So, it is invisible, and it lasts until it's destroyed, and it can go anywhere as far away as it likes from you, so this is how you use it for scouting. take it wherever you like. It is a super fun ability. But yeah, with that, let me, I'm going to assume the combat footage is playing now. Let me actually get into the kind of two things I wanted to talk about. So, my last build video that came out the other day was the Fist of Talos, and there's been, I'm not going to say, like, it's not controversy, it's not even in the slightest, because everyone in this community is really, really chill. But with this build, and this build in particular, but also with my other lore builds, there's been kind of a thing about whether or not I'm actually getting the lore right. And much to my admittance, I do not do a lot of research on the lore in these builds. As I said in that specific video, I only quickly look at the blurb of the deities in game when I make these deity builds. This is the wrong approach, and I understand that now, and I am going to be doing my research in the future. I wasn't exactly sure what a good source of information was, but everyone is pointing out to me the Forgotten Realms wiki, which I'm going to be using from now on, even though I wasn't sure about it originally, because fandom or .fandom websites tend to be a bit iffy with the information sometimes, so I wasn't sure how reliable it was, but you guys have assured me that it is, so that is the source of information I will be using from now on. However, after the Dancer of Elistray video, I noticed something. And so when I went into my Fist of Talos video, I kind of unwillingly, well, kind of pulled you all into an experiment of mine without your knowledge, and I apologise for this, but you'll see where I'm going. So I noticed something between my two most popular builds on the channel, my Psionic Warrior video and my Dancer of Elistray video. For some reason, these two builds, again for some reason, are way more popular than anything else I've made on the channel, by a long mile. The Psionic Warrior is at nearly 20k views now, whereas the Dancer of Elistray has just passed 10, which is insane. But why am I getting into this? Well, I was something I noticed about these two videos that made me realize why these two videos got so popular, and it's because of the YouTube algorithm and the way it handles comments. Because in the Psionic Warrior video, there were a lot of comments telling me that, hey, when I explained this concept of making a martial warrior that uses psychic skills, I didn't even get things like extra attack or really do things to make it a powerful martial, so a lot of people were correcting me on this mistake, as it were. So there was a lot of dialogue in the comments right from the off. Same with the Elistray build. Because that was more of a lore build, more people were talking about it from a lore perspective. And so there were people informing me about the lore, making corrections about the lore, and I'm not saying people were badgering me or, you know, being like, you know, rude about it. All of you were super chill and clearly just wanted me to, you know, kind of do my research in the future and make cool builds. But all of you guys were kind of just like really getting into the dialogue straight away, and that caused the YouTube videos to be expanded further. The more comments it got, the more it kind of pushed on. And I'm sorry if this like feels completely irrelevant to the rest of the video, but I love this kind of like analytics and algorithm kind of study. It's really fun to me. So with that, right, I was like, okay, so I'm going to go into the Fist of Talos with my interpretation of what Talos is. Whether or not this is actually correct or not isn't exactly going to be relevant, because I want to try this out. If I kind of go into it with my interpretation, right or wrong, I'm going to get more comments of people telling me their interpretations or what is correct, which is going to drive the algorithm, and I bet this video is going to get more views in a shorter amount of time than most of the other videos on my channel. And guess what? I was right. The Fist of Talos achieved about 3,000 views in 12 hours, which my Evil Dead video that came out a day prior took a whole day and then some to reach that point. And not only was that the case, but the Fist of Talos also had more likes and way more comments. As such, that video is still climbing even now. In addition to other videos I've made that kind of had these, you know, interesting little things that invoked more discussion. A few outliers being the Spider of Lolth, which got more people talking about the lore, so that video did quite well. The Draconic Warrior, which got a lot of people talking. about, like, you know, kind of dragon lore and such, which was interesting, and like the various mechanics of paladins and all that. And my Holy Arrow build, which is one of my more popular videos, actually, which surprises me, because so many people were talking about different ways to do an Arcane Archer. Now, there are a couple of things I think that I did notice as well with those videos that I, again, was kind of experimenting with. Using the terms Arcane Archer in, for example, my Holy Archer build, triggered that response from the algorithm of people looking to make that subclass in Baldur's Gate 3. Same as I quite cheekily, and I'm going to admit this now, deliberately put Bladesinger in my video description for the Dancer of Elistray video, even though the actual build itself doesn't really have much to do with blade singing as an actual D&D subclass, but it was kind of on theme enough that I could get away with it, and I think a combination of all these things together is what boosted those videos so high. The Psionic Warrior is still a bit of an outlier in that regard, but I think it's just because that, like, not many other people have made psychic builds, and that filled a void that existed at the time. I'm sorry again if this is all really rambly, but I really did want to talk about the statistics side of things, because I found this extremely interesting. So again, my utmost apologies for kind of deliberately, at least lore-wise, sabotaging the Fist of Talos build. As an actual build that is on theme and fun and good to use, it's still, there's nothing actually wrong with the build itself, just my lore justifications were not intentionally wrong, but more of a omission of truth type deal where I deliberately did not do the research. Which, from now on, is going to change. I'm going to be using the Forgotten Realms wiki to make these builds the most accurate and best that I possibly can, and I assure you of that moving forward. And if you feel like that what I did with my last build was somewhat of a, kind of a breach of trust or a betrayal in your opinion, I totally understand that, and I do apologize. But I had to test my theory because I was too curious, and I was proven correct. So, thank you for inflating my ego. But on to the next part of this. So obviously, if I'm going to be, you know, wanting to continue this little algorithmic wagon trainer moving, I kind of want to test the waters into something else. So usually when I make these build videos, I do not give any indication as to what my next video is going to be, because usually half the time I don't. However, with these deity build videos going forward, something else is going to change. I am going to be revealing at the end of my build videos what build I'm going to be making next, especially in the case of the deity build video. So you're going to get kind of a next episode preview type deal. So, while these aren't always going to be set in stone, at the very least for my deity builds, I am always going to stick true to this. So, I'm going to tell you all the next deity I'm going to build around, and while I'm not necessarily looking for build suggestions here, I am more looking for everyone's interpretation of the lore surrounding these deities, so that I can better inform myself on what to do. Obviously, I'm going to be doing my own research with the Forgotten Realms wiki, but I actually want to hear what everyone in the community's interpretation of the lore of Dungeons & Dragons is, so that I can incorporate all of your interpretations and, you know, ideas into the build. Again, I'm not looking for specific builds. Usually for these deities, I actually have, like, quite thematic builds figured out before I even look at the lore, but I do kind of want to hear what you guys think in terms of the actual lore itself. So my next deity build is going to be Tymora. My understanding of this build is going to be kind of a halfling build based around luck, because it's literally Lady Luck. But and obviously, you know, being the goddess of good fortune, if somebody is blessed by this person and is their chosen, they're going to be blessed with good luck. But I really do want to play around with the idea of luck in general, not just good luck, but also bad luck. And I think I've got and also being able to manipulate the luck and fate of the whole party. So it's going to be a halfling build, because from what I understand, Tymora does appear in a halfling form most of the time, although she has appeared as the form of a human and other things before. So it's kind of up in the air, but I kind of want to do a halfling build anyway, so I think that would be quite fun. But yeah, I want everyone to kind of tell me what's the scoop on Tymora. What do you guys think of them? What is your interpretation? And what interesting things do you think I should consider with the build moving forward? Again, I'm not going to spoil what the build is, but I feel like I've got quite an interesting idea of what to do. But yeah, it feels like this end section has been almost half as long as the actual video itself, so I'm going to cut it off here. And again, I'll restate everything. So, once again, I apologize for deliberately sabotaging the Talos build in a minor way, but I'm sorry for kind of like deliberately manipulating the algorithm to kind of get you guys to do something that I wanted you to do. Again, I really do apologize. It's not very cool of me to do, and you know, I'm going to never do that again. However, on the flip side of that, I do want to involve all of you guys in my build videos more, so with the next deity being Tymora, I want to hear your thoughts. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and thank you all so much for sticking with me through all of this, and I will see you all next time.